Yeah.
So welcome to the Tuesday's episode of the Alshech Academy, and I'm absolutely delighted to invite back to us our very first teacher, Rav Yirmiyahu, who did a slightly controversial lesson a few weeks ago, and this is we're inviting him back to
make it worse.
To explain it to us. I actually went through the tape yesterday, and I definitely need explanation, and I think its relevance to what's happening to our country at the moment is very profound. So thank you, Rav Yirmiyahu, and we have a few Lishemot. Obviously,
for each one of them?
Yeah,
okay.
And also obviously for all the people who are involved in the war, either who died, who need refuah shlema, who need.
So we'll give them differently, yes.
Yes.
So, לעילוי נשמתם של ראובן בן לבית שישפורטיש. גיטל בת אברהם, שרה בת גיטל.
You just mentioned all the chayalim and all the psulim.
I'm going to do that again.
And of course, for the elevation of neshama of all those we lost in this extraordinarily difficult day, which was Yom Shemini Chag Atzeret. And one of the subjects we're going to have here is actually what was the meaning of Chag Atzeret and what was it supposed to stop. And obviously, we didn't stop it. On the other hand, there is something quite sweet in what happened, believe it or not. And that's what we're going to talk about. So, obviously, we ask for the Hatzlacha of all the Chayalim. We ask for the Hatzlacha of all those that are there to help the wounded, to bring refuah to this world. And before even starting to explain anything, I would tell you that your most important bracha these days is Asher Yatzar. Really? Because as the Ari said, Asher Yatzar is about bringing refuah to the world, not just to you personally. You start with asking for you, but ask it brings to the world. And as we know, we've suffered a terrible makkah, and we're still just, in the waves that follow this makkah. But there's one thing that we need is the refuah in relation to this makkah. And so your bracha, your birkat Asher Yatzar, you should consider it as most holy and most crucial in this avodah. And please, as you say, Rofe chol basar umafli la'asot, include all our people in this terrible time. Amen. So I'll give you just a little reminder of Jewish history. We came out of Egypt in our calendar in 2448. We entered the land of Israel in 2088. And then the first temple was destroyed in 3338. And why am I saying that? Because you see, you have a tradition, a very profound tradition in the Gemara, in Talmud Bavli, Maseret Gittin. It's almost at the very end of Maseret Gittin. In fact, unfortunately, most people who do a siyum of Maseret Gittin won't explain that. Well, actually, they could, because it's really like an lasdav.
Why?
I would invite them. They could take it as the siyum, because it's really in the last two dapim of Maseret Gittin. It's a very profound teaching. It says, Amar Rab Hizda, Amar Rugba. Amar Rela, Amar Rab Hizda, Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah. So some say that actually it was Rab Hizda who said the name of Rabbi Yirmiyah. And I'm not going to give about what's the order of the names and why do we say them like that. The Ari had a beautiful, extraordinary explanation about what does it mean when we say in the name of Darash Meremar. And that's the most important, who was at the head of the Academy of Surah. And he expounded. What did he say? He said, what is the meaning, my dirti, what's the meaning of this pasuk that says, Vayishkod Hashem al hara? So you could say, Yishkod, it's this term which is the same root as for shaked, which is a an almond. Why? Because the almond blossoms before anything else. And so he says that Hashem hastened the bad. And then it continues and says, and he brought that bad upon us. Ki tzadik Hashem Elokeinu, because God is, well, you know, the first meaning you would feel of it is he's righteous. And so Meremar asked in his academy of sages there in Bavel, Mishum de tzadik Hashem Eloheinu, Waishkod Hashem lara'a vayaviyah alenu. Says, because he is just, because he is righteous, because he is a God of charity, he's bringing on us the bad. Like, do we understand the Passouk like that? Seriously? That's the way we understand the Passouk? So he says, Ela, but really rather, he says, Tzedakah asa Kadosh Baruch Hu im Yisrael shehegla galut tzidkiyahu. He actually did charity, acted charitably towards Israel in doing what? In making out to send out the exile of Tzidkiyahu, Melech Tzidkiyahu, وعدين galut Yechonia keyemet, at the point that the exile of the previous one, of the king Yechonia, was still existing in Bavel. Why? Dirtiv bet begalut Yechonia Harash wa Mazger Elef. One was talking about two terms, two set of holy sages. One that we called the craftsman, Harash. And of course it's related to Heresh in the sense of like deaf mute. Why? Because they were making others deaf mute in front of the Chokhmah. No one could talk. Once they would open their mouth, everyone was mute because they had nothing to add. They had nothing they could really compare to. And the other is Masger. Masger is, you could say in a way, the gatekeeper. So what's going on here? Well, you've had the gatekeepers and the craftsmen who are extraordinary sages, who were still there in Bavel, who could educate, who could teach, who could form, who could transmit the extraordinary wisdom they had drawn down in their Torah to the very ones who were exiled from this land. So in other words, one is saying the calamity that happened at the point of the destruction of Beit Rishon was a charitable act. Why? Because was it supposed to happen later? And then we would not have this transmission? Yeah, well, that's what the Gemara continues. I'm just skipping just a bit so that we can cover all this. Ula Amar, Shehigdim shte shanim. That actually HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that's the matter of saying Vayishkod Hashem alara, that he actually hastened the calamity. He said that actually 2 years before what should have been, the first temple was destroyed.
It was destroyed 2 years before
where it should have been. And that allowed this transmission of Chokhmah. This allowed this transmission that allowed the sages that were exiled from this land to actually find greater sages than them that were in Bavel that were still there to transmit something. And if you didn't have that, then we would have literally lost Torah, lost wisdom. You wouldn't have the Talmud Bavli the way you have it now. What we're learning from now. But what is this 2 years from what? And it says, Le ונושנתם. ונושנתם is a code. You see, literally it means you lasted long. And it's from Parashat Wat Hanan, where it says, Ki tolid banim uvnei banim, ונושנתם בארץ. As you will give birth, you will engender children and the children to your children. So in other words, you have generations going on. ונושנתם בארץ, and you lasted long in the land. Till now, it sounds amazing, right? Wonderful. But then it says, v'yishchatem. But you dealt with things with corruption, in a corrupt manner. And an example of that is, wa'asitem pesel tmunat kol. And you did a graven image of everything. ועשיתם הרע, and you did the wrong, what's wrong, בעיני השם אלוקיך, להכעיסו. You did what's wrong in front of Hashem, your God, to entice him, to anger him. And then the next pasuk is the reason for all which is being said here, which is a terrible pasuk, which says, העידותי בכם היום את השמים ואת הארץ, כי עבוד תאבדון מהר מעל הארץ. He says, I have taken witness against you, heaven and earth, to actually utterly destroy you quickly from this land. Asher atem ovrim et hayarden. Now, what is the context of that? Two psukim earlier, Moshe Rabbeinu tells us, he tells us, Ki anochi med ba'aretz. I will die, I die in this land. I won't cause this, you will cause it. But he doesn't tell us that it's so simple. Kind of saying, if I don't cross it, who are you to cross it? I'm going to explain to you the rules here. And the rules are not a simple rules. Is that you're going to cross it, you're going to be in that land, and you're going to grow old in that land, and you're going to last. But the longer you last, the more probable that you're not doing things properly. And you have a date of expiration. And a whole tradition came from that the date of the expiration date, the amount of time that we could stand at that point was a tradition of ונושנתם. That's what Maseret Gittin tells us. I know that some people will not like what I'm saying here, but if they don't want to debate with me, don't debate with me. Debate with the Gemara. If you don't love it, you have a problem with it, then you go. Do like the French were doing. Burn the volumes. If you don't like it, you have another option. Swallow it. And so, ונושנתם is giving you a tradition about what are the time, the conditions on time about our stay. You see, it has many double letters. Wav and Wav, ונושנתם, two nun, a shin and a tav, and then a mem sofit. And there's a structure there. And actually, there is a whole tradition about it. Now, so many things we could say about the Passukim, and I invite you to take it. Parashat Va'etchanan, it's Perek Dalet, okay, so chapter 4 is Passukim that go from Kav Bet to Lamed Aleph. And the reason I say Lamed Aleph is that Lamed Aleph is purposely contradicting it in order to give you something which is sweeter. It says, Ki el rachum Hashem lokecha. Right after having told you that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he says like this. Ki Hashem Elokecha esh ochlahu elkana. Okay, so in other words, he's an eating, a devouring fire. He is a jealous God. Okay, but just a few psukim enough after that, in a way, as a sweetening of the matter. The Torah says, Ki el rachum Hashem Elokecha lo yarpecha velo yashchitecha. But why is velo yashchitecha? Because you see, the root in ve'ishchatem, you dealt corruptly, you dealt with corruption, your ways were corrupt. By the way, a lot of what people were accusing, some in this government and some even in the religious world of being corrupt. Same thing. But what is it? Same root, where HaKadosh Baruch Hu answers it and says, Velo yashchitecha. It's the same root. One which is about dealing with corruption, and one which is in a corrupt way, and one which is about destroying. And so another words of saying, where HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Kel Rachum V'Hanun, is that he will, though we acted in a way which brought corruption, in a corrupt manner, and we brought more corruption. Because v'ishchatem doesn't mean that you just one individual or few individuals deal in things in a corrupt manner. It means that they actually bring corruption. And though we did that, and we're very good at that, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu does the opposite measure and says that I will not destroy you, using the same root. Yet, the psukim in between, he says, I will surely destroy you from. So what's going on here? What are the dynamics? What is the matter? There seems to be something which is utter, inescapable din. And on the other hand, there seems to be something which is of rachamim, right? Because it says, Ki el rachum Hashem Elokecha. So where's the middle ground and what's going on? So we have a beautiful tradition which was given by the Ari, by Ha'eloki Rabbi Yitzchak, here in Sfat, here in our beloved Safed. And it's been kept as an oral tradition mostly, simply because it's not always easy to understand it, and many didn't want to be the ones actually transmitting this type of Torah. To the point that even Rabbi Shmuel Vital, the son of Rabbi Chaim Vital, who was the main Talmid and the one who actually composed all the Shmoneh Sha'arim and all of what became the Etz Chaim, Sefer Etz Chaim, actually even changed many parts in the text because I guess he wasn't very comfortable about this being just transmitted just the way it is. Now, fortunately, in those last years, we actually have the manuscripts of Rabbi Chaim Vital himself, and we actually have quite a clue about what was being taught. Beyond that, beyond just having a clue about what was taught, we actually had an oral tradition. Because you see, from the Ari till our days, there have been sages who have been continuing an unbroken chain of tradition about those teachings. And my own master, Alav Shalom, was part of that chain. And he had a clear tradition about it. Now, I know that by the point that we obtained those printed version of the original manuscript of Rabbi Chaim Vital, I personally felt how much he rejoiced up there. It was quite a few years after his own Petira. But I personally rejoiced greatly here. Not only because we have actually the original text, but because it is in perfect phase with what he was teaching and practicing. And so, what is that text? It's on a Passouk that all of us say in Psuke de Zimra every morning. Asholar imrato aretz ad me'era yaruz dvaro. And it's a very special Passouk because you have two concepts in it. You have one thing which is called imrato and one which is called devaro. And I don't know how much more time we have, about half an hour? Yeah. So, I'll run a bit here. But he says like this, Dibur Lashon Koshi. He says, when you say Dibur, when you say Devaro, it's not an easy matter. It actually corresponds to something harsh. Many times one doesn't realize unfortunately, few people realize the difference there are between those two terms. But there's a fundamental difference, and this teaching is going to reveal it to us. He says, Ve'imrato lashon rachamim. Whereas Imra, when he says Imrato, his saying is actually a language of compassion. ואמר, כשהקדוש ברוך הוא שולח טובה ורחמים בעולם הזה, אז הקדוש ברוך הוא sends goodness, sends good things in this world. הוא שולחו על ידי עצמו. Then he does it just himself, directly. You see, in the last shiur, we were talking about the Melucha of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the kingship of God, and how we take it for granted, and how it is difficult, how we've turned the picture in a way where we're not anymore here to actually allow the kingship of the divine in this world, but we consider as if it's already there. Though our tefillot and everything we've had in our avodah of that kodesh, of Chodesh Tishrei, was all for, bringing the Melucha of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And another matter, that's what we're going to talk about, which is unfortunately a bit too forgotten. ולפיכך, גם תכף מגיע עד הארץ. And that's the reason that it arrives there and at that point immediately to this earth. Because it's direct, divine providence. It's actual sweetness, actual goodness. It's God bringing this goodness to this world, and then it happens immediately. On the other hand, כשהוא דברו שהוא דין, אז ירוץ מאליו הדיבור בעולם הזה. He says at that point that it corresponds to din, that which corresponds to devaro, then the matter itself, this dibur, is actually running on its own in this world. That is, to talk very clearly, it is indirect. You know, this is a famous teaching of which is parallel to that. And by the way, Rabbi Shmuel Vital himself had a note saying, well, maybe there's a parallel with that. You know, in Maseret Tanit, it tells us that when HaKadosh Baruch Hu, when we experience the rain here in Eretz Israel, we should know that it is HaKadosh Baruch Hu who is watering his garden. And it says, and he doesn't do it al yedei shaliach. He doesn't do it through an emissary. And of course, it is very disturbing for many to hear that. Because you see, Hasidic theology has got us used to already take that for granted. So when suddenly the Gemara tells you that it doesn't do it for Shaliach, you say, why? Because there's another mode. There's a mode where he does it for Shaliach and not himself. Yes, anywhere else. Anywhere else. And that's what is going on here in this teaching. He's telling you when it's actual tova, when it's actual goodness, what is called imra, himself, God himself takes care of it, and it's immediate, and it's good goodness itself. But when it is not that, even something that goes slightly away from that. Rabbi Shmuel Vital had this little correction because he just wanted to express it the way, in his own words, he says, Lo meyahed et shemo al zeh. In other words, he doesn't unite his name on it. It's a way of saying, he doesn't want us to associate it with him. Okay? That's why, by the way, it's very disturbing when people have something which is happening to them which is utterly bad, Rahman al-Islam. What do they say? You know, they thank God on it. Now, there's two sides of it. There's one side which is the end of Maseret Brachot, which tells us that even on bad you shall praise God. Right? You shall thank God. But that is the base of which bracha? Baruch Dayan HaEmet. And unfortunately, people say, like, Baruch Hashem in a very general sense. Do you know that the root Bet Resh Chaf means at the same time to bless and to curse? Do you realize that if you actually take something which is happening to you, which is difficult, and you say Baruch Hashem, but in a sense of like, you know, damn it, right? You are actually saying like, curse God. Do you realize that? That's what's going on. So you have to be very, very careful in the way you actually use those matters. You see here, what's going on here is this, is that the difficulty, the utter difficulty, is not coming from God directly. Utter difficulty is not coming from God directly. Utter difficulty is actually coming through Shlichim. Now, of course, you might ask me, well, what about the whole Ein Od Milevado thing, you know? Wasn't we supposed to hold by that? And here again, you have a huge misunderstanding. You know, there is one famous Gemara, which is, by the way, to my understanding, the only sugya in the whole Talmud Bavli which actually uses the Passouk Ein Od Milevado. About this story. You know, we all know this story. You have Rab Hanina, he's walking on a path. You have some type of witch going after him, some type of sorceress. She actually collects the dust under his feet. And, you know, the Talmidim of Rav Hanina, they go to him and say, aren't you a bit worried? You know, like, seriously, like someone has been, you know, and she's not such a good person. She's been taking the dust under your feet. So obviously she wants to curse you or do something about you, right? So aren't you worried? And he says, I go with the principle, I go with the Passouk of Ein Od Milevado. Now, of course, that's what people want to apply today. That's what when you hear people say Ein Od Milevado, that's what they want to apply. But they forget the rest of the Gemara, because the Gemara doesn't stop there. The Gemara continues and says, but that works only for Rab Hanina because he was a special being. Why? Why does it say that? Because you see, what happens is that Rav Hanina knew how to deal with the dinim that had been engendered by transgressions. Our problem is that we don't know how to do that. Our problem is that we're playing two games at the same time. As any tzaddikim, you know, that's Mishle, you know, and Megillat Kohelet also. As any tzaddik, one sins. That's the way it is. There isn't such a thing as a tzaddik ba'aretz who doesn't sin. That's you can't contradict that. That's Shlomo HaMelech. Again, if you have a problem with that, you have a problem with Shlomo HaMelech. Good luck with that. Now, here is the matter. So you have, there are sins. If you have sins, how do you deal with it? How do you deal from, with the matter of the sin? You have two sides of it. You have one side which is called Yirbosh Avonotenu, right? Aswata. And which is, Yirbosh Avonotenu corresponds to, he will conquer our sins. And that corresponds to the 8th midah. And it's our sins. But the 9th midah becomes, with Tashlir Bim Sulotiam, Kol Chatotam, which is, by the way, the source of Tashlir. But it's not ours anymore. Kol Chatotam it becomes. The Ari explains that what happens is that though there were transgressions, he conquered them. They're not ours anymore, because what is the only thing left? The residue of it. The din, which is created by the judgment, which is created by this transgression. And that is something that you can't deal with. And that's why we need the procedure of tashlir, but which is really a yichud of knowing how to actually engage the divine in putting this in mitzvot yam. Now, this is not the subject of the shiur, so I'm not going to stop with this. But then, so how does this teaching continue? It says, Ki ein ra yored min hashamayim. Because you see, in principle, normally, there's no such thing. There should be no such thing as ra, as actual bad that comes from above. So that's the reason that it takes very indirect ways. And you would be totally wrong to see such a bad thing happening and saying, that's God who brought it on the snow, because himself he doesn't want to say that. He doesn't want to say that. He divorces it. He says that it has nothing to do with him. He doesn't want his name associated with that. But you and with your pious, theology, you're saying, this is God himself. No, himself is telling you, I don't want it. I will have nothing to do with it.
But he allows it.
Well, of course, akol birshuto. Everything is allowed by him. But with that statement, a lot of what we're doing is that we're collapsing everything. Structures, orders, receivers, everything. Collapsing it all in one. And we say, yeah, but he allowed it. But it doesn't mean anything, he allowed it. And I'm going to explain to you even with what's going on in this war now. He says, Ve'od shinui acher. This matter which is not utter goodness will not happen immediately. It won't happen immediately. By the way, this term techef, as we know, because I've heard just a few weeks ago, people saying the exact opposite of that, and one has to correct it. When the famous story about the Ari and Rabbi Chaim Vital, when he told them to actually do it techef, was what? Was about Maim Harunim. Not Netilat Yadayim before Hamotzi. Okay? Now, we've heard this said a few times. People love to say that it would be about Netilat Yadayim before Hamotzi, and that one should not talk and there should be something. There is no such thing. Okay? And the Gemara that they based it on was about Maim Achronim and was about Birkat Hamazon. And the Ari himself in his story with Rabbi Chaim Vital was about Birkat Hamazon, and it's not about Netilat Yadayim. But what happens? You see, that's a very beautiful example. And that's a second solution for you. After Birkat HaShe'etzach. Make sure that you say, that you engage Birkat Hamazon in a most, mindful, integrated way. And how to do it? First, make sure that you do Ma'im Achronim, and that immediately after that, that's the Techef. And by doing that, have the intention that in the same way that you've gone directly from Ma'im Achronim at the end of your meal and Birkat Hamazon, that God himself will act with you with things that are only techef, that are only immediately following. And what is the only thing that goes immediately following? Pure goodness. On the other hand, what he's telling you here is that the things that aren't pure goodness, they don't come immediately. They linger. They linger in time. Because you see, there are judgment that God doesn't associate himself with. And they are taking other agents, other matters. Now, you could always tell me, well, so wasn't Ein Od Milvado to say that there's no such thing as those agents? No, and no. You know what it was about? Even our dear and extraordinary sage, Rabbi Chaim Mivolojin, Talmid of the Gra, explained it very well. He said, what does it mean when you say en od milevado? It's a tefillah. It's not principial. It's not a principle. There is no such principle. Ultimately in the world there will be such a principle. But you know what it will be? It will be at the point that we have done the yichudo, that we will have done this yichud, this essential yichud. Not you and the divine. Stop with that. Not that. But you will have, united everything which is above. That you will have taken each one of the 120 tzirufei Elokim and that you will have made them one. Bayom hahu Hashem echad u'shmo echad. That's what the Passouk says. On that day Hashem will be one and His name will be one. That's the ultimate yichud. But as long as we have not reached that, then what you need to do? You need to actually have those other forces surrender. One of the ways is en od milevado. One of the other ways is what Rabbi Akiva was saying, that every man should be used to say, Kol David Rachamana letav Avid. But again, that is not principial. That is not a principle. It's not telling you that everything which is happening in this world comes from Rachamana and everything is good. No, there's no such thing. Not telling you that. He's telling you that. And why is he telling it to you in Aramaic? Pay attention to the Gemara there. Everything is in Hebrew. And suddenly he tells you to say this thing in Aramaic. Because that is what the Chitzonim understand. So by saying that sentence, Kol de Avid Rachamana letav Avid, you are actually having those external forces surrender to the goodness that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants to bring directly to this world. And you're having them, in a way, forget about the other diburim, the dibur, the other things that take time to arrive in this world. Now, we only have about 15 minutes, so let's just continue this. It says, Rak ad mehera. He says, this matter of lingering and taking time for that matter of judgment, which isn't pure goodness, because if it was pure goodness, it would have come directly from God immediately. He says, this matter which isn't pure goodness, which is it goes ad mehera, till quickly. What do you mean till quickly? Because it says like this. Ugvar yadata, and you already knew. You knew what? He's going to actually refer to the teaching in Maseret Gittin. Ki mehera de mare alma, the mehera, the quickly of the master of the world. Titen shanim kemo shamru rabotenu zal. And so what is it, Titen? 850. What are they alluding to? Because you see, 850. Because you see, we said we entered the land in 2488, right? And in 3338 we were exiled. How many years? 850. But what was supposed to be? It was supposed to be the ונושנתם, which is 2 value more, which is 852. Yes. And so that's where things, in a way, were better. What do you mean better? Well, I'll explain to you something. You see, this goes with the same idea as what we've had in the Avodat Kodesh from Rosh Hashanah till Sukkot. Only that we're very good at concentrating on something else. We were very good at kavanot of what I'll call Care Bears. You know what Care Bears were? No? Care Bears? Well, find out what Care Bears were, and you'll see. It's a very interesting. It's a very interesting, outlook on the world. In French, we would have a good term for that. It's called bondieuserie. You know what bondieuserie means? It's considering that it's about the good God and the good things that comes with Him. It's like confiding that everything is just like that. It's an ideal world of Care Bears. Anyway. And so what is the matter? Well, you see, on Rosh Hashanah itself, something that we repeated till Rosh Hashanah Rabbah is that famous Passouk. Le'olam Hashem devarecha nitzav b'shamayim. Now pay attention, it didn't say imratecha, it says devarecha. Because that's those things that aren't pure goodness. And what does the Passouk mean? It means those things stay b'shamayim. Why? Because that's exactly this teaching. It tells you those things are not supposed to come down. They're supposed to stay up there. You see, all the days you've had from Rosh Hashanah till Rosh Hashanah Rabbah was you to have those contemplative moments where you ask Shamayim, keep the bad stuff up there, keep the bad decrees up there. You see, we've come to a point of such hypocrisy that we don't even call them bad decrees now. We call them harsh decrees. You know what I mean? Because we don't want to say that there's such a thing as a bad decree. But Sar Shalom Mizrahi Diyada Sharabi, the famous Rashash, our famous master of Rashash, when he gave his tefillah about this Passouk, Leolam Hashem Devarcha Nisa B'Shamayim, he said, yes, there is such a thing as a Gzera Ra'ah. There is such a thing as a bad decree. Okay? Such a thing as a bad decree. And you have to just do everything in your tefillah so that you would keep it up. And that goes till Sukkot. Why? Because the only place in Maseret Soukkah where one gives you meaning, actual meaning to your Netilat Lulav, what it says? It says you should be pushing away and bringing back about what? About the ruchot, ra'ot, the bad winds. Vetalilim ra'im. Okay? It didn't tell you harsh. Didn't you caché? Told you ra. Because there is such a thing. Now you have to understand, there's a counterpart to that, which is beautiful. Is that you see ra'ah, the way we see bad usually, resh ayin he. Resh ayin he is a root on itself, which doesn't mean bad. It means to graze. It means to think, to meditate. That's the famous Yodu Hara Yonai. My meditation, my thoughts will praise you. Hashem Ro'i, which is a wordplay. Because you see, Ro'i as my shepherd is the same root as my thoughts, my meditation. The Resh Ein He. Because you see, bad as the word, not as the root, Resh Ein He, is from the root Resh Ein Ein, which is a different root. So you actually have, through your meditation, a way to act on that bad. And what are you supposed to do with that bad? Keep it up there. That is, you're actually supposed to contemplate and make sure that all which could be wrong would be kept up there and not brought down. But of course, in the Care Bears world, we don't work like that. What we worked, we say, everything is utter goodness, everything is awesome, everything is good, beautiful. We bring down the shefa, the abundance, we actually connect with God, etc. The Gemara itself was telling you, you're there to push away those bad things. No. You don't want to look at it that way. In fact, what does it say? The Gemara continued, in Maseret Soukkah, when it explained that, it continued with this beautiful statement. It says like this. It said, so though the waving of the lulav is a residual part of the mitzvah, because what was the actual mitzvah? It was
נטילת.
Sorry?
נטילת. זה המיtzvah.
No, the mitzvah was actually bringing to the temple. The shaking was only a residual part.
Yes.
You were bringing to the temple, nothing to the temple. The shaking was a residual part. It was not the mitzvah itself in relation to the chag. And he says, you actually learn that even a residual part of the mitzvah, ve'otzeret ruchot utlalim ra'im, and that is the meaning of Yom Shemini Chag Atzeret. Because on that very day, you're supposed to have succeeded to stop all that you meditated on, that is the bad that could have come on this world. And you were supposed to stop it. And obviously, we did not stop it. Now.
Or it could be that we stopped something worse.
So that's exactly what I'm going to talk about. So there are another matter. That you see, on the one hand we say that, on the other hand, let's face it, since the Shoah, we didn't have one single day with as many Jews slaughtered. Not on the War of Independence, nor of anything. Even, you know, what happened in South America many years ago, you know, you had 85 Jews killed. I mean, we're not making competitions here, but I'm just telling you what's going on is that we've had the greatest amount of Jews slaughtered in a single day since the Shoah. Obviously something is going on here. What's going on? Well, let me tell you one thing. Yom Kippur itself, the Yom Kippur War, was quite a matter. And you see, all that we mentioned here was a tradition that stemmed out of the ARIZaL, but it continued till our sages today. My master was part of the Tzadikim Nistarim in Jaffa, in the Atika of Yafo and the surrounding neighborhoods. And what I explained here, they knew, you know, like P, you know, I don't know how to explain how much more they knew than that, but it's, you know, it was much greater. In fact, we've been, since many years, thinking of, and I know that my master would have wanted that, only that they never really did it, because they were afraid of what happened just now. They wanted us to write a book on that, to write at least, there was something that explains this. Because you see, what happens is this. ונושנתם are values of years that you have from the moment that you settle. The Yom Kippur War was the last war we had where our enemies were here to take us out of our settling the land. You see, War of Independence was the first one like that. We were finally had in November 1947, we finally had a chance to actually be given, you know, the next step after in this land after the British Empire. And after that, it was a matter of, well, you know, those Jews can't settle here. It's not possible. We're not going to allow them to actually stay in this land. So the War of Independence was an attempt at driving us away from this land. That we won't be able to settle. The Yom Kippur War was the same thing. And any of the wars that happened after that were not such a matter. It was a very different types of matters. The last time that we actually settled for good, when one tried to kick us out of this land, was Yom Kippur War. And the Tzadikim Nistarim of Jaffa, following the Ari, were very much aware of that. But they were aware that we had each time certain quantities of years that go with the letters ונושנתם. So after 6 years, what did they do? They organized that just after, that they would fast right after Simchat Torah. Why? Because when did the Yom Kippur War end? So you have different ideas about it. You have some that say, according to the UN, that it was the 22nd of October in 1973. You have some that would say the 24th, some would say the 25th. Okay? The accepted date here in Israel, at least the way we live it in this land, is to say it was the 24th of October, which corresponded to the 28th of Tishrei. Right? What's the date today?
25th.
Sorry?
25th.
Yes. So 3 days from now. Now you see, what happened is that they would fast each and every time that you had one of those letters that would apply a number of years after the armistice, after the peace, after the settling of this land, after Yom Kippur War. So 6 years after Yom Kippur War, they would have a fast in order to ward off this matter. And of course,
26?
because of the Wav of ונושנתם.
The Vav.
Then after that, what do you have? You have the other Wav that makes Yud Bet, that makes 12 years. Then what do you have? You have the Mem that could count as 40. That would be 40. But you see, last time they did it as a group, last time they did it as this group of Tzadikim Nistarim and Yafo was in 1985, which corresponded, which was at that point after the First War of Lebanon. And I can humbly say that when we came to 40, right, years after the armistice of Yom Kippur War, which was basically in 2013. 2013, already more than 4 years after the Petira of my master. And it was very hard for me because I felt, who am I to do any of this?
What we don't hear, sorry.
It was very hard for me to think, who am I to do this? My master wasn't here. The Tzadikim this time of Yafo were not here. All of it, was finished. And yet, I humbly did a fast. Fortunately, nothing happened. I'm not saying it had anything to do with my fast, but here's the matter. Now, what are the modalities of this ונושנתם tradition? You see, these are the three terms that are used here inside this teaching of the Ari. The Gam, the Ach, and the Rak. These are three modes. There's a mode which is a mode of expansion and of pure benevolence. And what is it? It's when the date has passed and we escaped it and we are able to ward it off. We were able to actually, push it away. And it is not anymore part of the things that can be happening in the proximity in time. And that would have been the case if after this week, after the 28th of Tishrei, we had seen nothing happening. And that would have been the result of Olat Filot and of course of Rachamei Shemayim. Then you have the two other modes, which are the Rak and the Ach. And I will let you deduce which one is what. But there's one which is that you actually reach the exact date and that a calamity happens at that point. But then it's utter, total destruction. And one of the things that really was hanging on our heads here was actual exile. Many people talked about that was what was going on in this land, with the division we had in our people, with the difficulty we were trying to live, with the fact that we were even giving to our own enemies, reasons to say what they're saying against us and all of that. We were actually, many of us were actually afraid that we would go into exile, that this would lead us to exile. Now I can tell you, there's one good news. The good news is that the fuse went off before. If we had gone to the 28th of Tishrei and this disaster would have happened, I can tell you it would be our exile, literally.
So the fact
And why? Because what is 50 years? It's the noon of ונושנתם. You see? It's the very second letter there, that we had 50 years of a long stay. And that's what it means, ונושנתם. You stayed long in the land. But be careful. It comes with conditions and you're not holding by them. Now, the other possibility is that things get out of control and that this dibur, this koshi, this difficulty, this thing which has nothing to do with God's goodness, this matter which is that God doesn't want to associate with him in any sort of way, this matter which goes through shlichim, that goes through emissaries, this matter happened 6 days before the 28th of Tishrei. Okay. Unfortunately, on the very day where we should be able to celebrate Chag Atzeret, the day where those bad things are stopped. Now, we were not able to stop them. And obviously, one of the reasons is that a lot of us don't hold by that and don't even have such a tefillah. But I encourage you now to not only engage with Birkat Asher Yatzar in a correct manner, to bring refuah to this world. I encourage you to do Mayim Aharonim and do immediately Birkat Hamazon in order to ask the divine to bring our people the goodness immediately and not through the ways that take detours and eventually that won't be good. And the third thing I encourage you to do is to relate to actual, real chokhmah. And in Torah, one should not go with the pitiful. Because you see, Maseret Gittin told us, it happened, the destruction of the first temple happened 2 years before the date. So that the ones who survived here in Eretz Israel could learn with the sages of Babel. And what happened here is for us not to learn, the Petefo Torah. It's for us to learn actual chokhmah. Have, some higher values about what's Torah, what's wisdom. Don't settle for the pitiful. Okay? Go for what is actually will bring wisdom. And you know what's will wisdom? It's one that not only the people who aren't like you, who aren't religious like you, will recognize as wisdom. But it's one that the other nations would even recognize. That's why it's written in the Torah, Ki chochmatchem uvinatchem le'ne'amim, which are written just a few psukim away from this in Parashat Vayetchanan. Because she is your chokhmah and your wisdom and your understanding in the eyes of people. So in other words, it's not just that you would have religious people where what they would say would be respected by those that don't consider themselves religious, but it's also that the other people that do not even have nothing to do with Am Yisrael, would look at what you say and what you study and what you learn and what you contemplate and what you're engrossed in as being actual wisdom. Okay? So in just the same way that the first temple, the destruction was actually hastened, came earlier by 2 years in order for them to learn with the actual sages, make sure that you also learn with actual sages.
Thank you. You're saying that the incident happened 6 days before the 28th. That is a sign of what?
That is a sign of actually not being this, auto-destruction, just in the same way that 852 years after the entering of the land would have given us, I'm not the one saying it, the Maharsha says that on Maseret Gittin, many of our greatest sages say that. It says if we had gone with 2 more years, we would have been literally destroyed according to what's written in those psukim. Literally destroyed. Not exiled. Destroyed. No more chance, nothing. Finished. And so here, what we're having had this happening, now of course, the closer you come to one of those quantities of time where such a judgment was actually decreed, and where this bad decree wasn't pushed up and kept up, then the closer you come to one of those quantities of years, the harsher it is, because the less is rachamim. The more it's closer to the giving of the decree, which is obviously to what originated as you're settling the land. In other words, if we had such a calamity happening just 6 years or just a few days before 6 years after the armistice of Yom Kippur War, we would not have had this calamity. But because it is a long time, it lingers. But when it lingers, it brings a lot of things with it. And that's this disaster we've had now. But it's a disaster, but it's nothing compared to what would have been if that had happened on the 28th of Tishrei. And of course, it's much harsher and much more terrible than if we had simply warded it off and we had simply escaped from it. But what to do? We're after the fact now.
Any questions, anybody?
But for the chokhmah, we need tzaddikim to learn. Otherwise, we do what we do, Baalei Batim, we read a little Gemara, we don't understand anything. We do the prayer, yes, we say, Shem Dvarcha Nitzar B'Einayim, we have faith, and that's it, that's what we have. What can we do, We don't, we pray to have connection with tzaddikim,